The scan returned wrong results before Korath even finished reading them. She was standing at the secondary weapons console on the bridge of the Varath flag carrier immovable doctrine, running target confirmation on the contact that Fleet Commander Drevek had already logged as a nuisance vessel, and the numbers were wrong in a way that made her check them twice, and then check them again. The human ship, registry designation ISF Gravemark, class unspecified, transit corridor C7 of the Hirvath Reach, was sitting 54,000 kilometers off their bow at zero relative velocity, which was the first wrong thing. Ships running transit corridors did not stop. They did not hold station and wait. They moved, because the Reach's gravitational shear tore stationary hulls apart inside of 6 hours. The Gravemark was not being torn apart. Its hull stress readings were nominal. "Confirmed contact," Korath said, keeping her voice flat. "Single vessel, human configuration, mass register is..." She stopped. "Mass register is what, Ensign?" Drevek said. He was at the command rail, arms folded, looking at the main viewport where the Gravemark was a dark shape against the Reach's amber gas columns. He had the voice of a man who had already decided what the next 5 minutes looked like. "Elevated, sir," she recalculated, "significantly elevated. The hull mass is reading at 4.7 times the projected figure for a standard Terran patrol cruiser. Sensor error. I've run the calibration twice. The mass register is consistent across all 12 secondary nodes and both primary arrays." She pulled the data to her display and looked at what it said. The Gravemark was not a patrol cruiser. A patrol cruiser ran between 80 and 90,000 metric tons on a standard configuration. Whatever was holding station in the transit corridor ahead of them was reading at 421,000 metric tons, and the mass profile was dense, packed into a hull length her arrays put at only 430 meters. That was a ship with more mass per meter than anything Korath had studied in the Varath Fleet Academy's threat catalog. "Fleet Commander," she turned from her console, "I need to flag a tactical concern." Drevek looked at her. He had commanded the immovable doctrine for 11 years. He had 14 fleet engagements on his record and had never lost a ship under his command. He was looking at Korath the way men like him always looked at young officers who paused when they shouldn't pause, with a patience that was also a warning. "The Varath Reach Enforcement Protocol gives us authority to challenge any unregistered vessel in contested transit corridors," he said. "We challenged it. It has not responded. We have legal standing. Sir, the vessel's mass signature doesn't match any registered Terran hull class. The energy output from its engineering section," she checked the reading again, "is running at figures I'd expect from a warship of roughly 600,000 tons displacement. The discrepancy between its apparent hull length and its power output suggests a weapons loadout I cannot quantify. We don't have a catalog entry for what this ship is. The Terrans run patrol cruisers through this corridor every 40 days, Drevek said. This is a patrol cruiser that has developed a mechanical fault and stopped to make repairs. That is the only classification that makes tactical sense." "It isn't making repairs, sir. Its hull stress readings are nominal. It's holding position intentionally." The bridge was quiet for a moment. Korath was aware of the 7 other officers at their stations not looking at her, which was what Varath crew did when a subordinate pressed a point past the comfortable threshold. She was 24 years old. She had been assigned to the immovable doctrine 6 weeks ago, fresh from the academy, still learning the weight of the insignia on her collar. She knew exactly how this looked. She said it anyway. "Fleet Commander, I am formally recommending we request an identification confirmation from Varath Naval Command before engaging. If this vessel is not what our catalog says it is, we need to understand what it is before we commit to a firing solution." Drevek turned back to the viewport. The Gravemark sat in the amber glow of the Reach's gas columns. Silent, dark, holding station at a gravitational anomaly that should have been tearing it apart. "We have 8 cruisers, 2 destroyers, and this command vessel," Drevik said. 11 hulls to 1. Whatever the Terrans have sent, they have sent it alone, and it is holding position in our enforcement corridor without a response to challenge. That is either an equipment malfunction or a provocation." He unfolded his arms. "Weapons officer, prepare a firing solution for the forward battery. I want a single strike package, enough to damage but not destroy. A persuasion shot." Koreth heard the weapons officer confirm the order. She heard the battery charge hum, rise through the deck plating under her feet. "Sir," her voice was steady. She was proud of that. "I am entering a formal tactical descent in the bridge log." "Noted," Drevik said. "Fire." The immovable doctrine's forward battery discharged. 6 heavy emitters at full yield. A strike package designed to crack the engineering section of a standard patrol cruiser and leave it adrift. The light of the discharge filled the viewport for 3 seconds and then faded. Koreth watched her display. The gravemark did not drift. It did not emit the thermal signature of a damaged drive core. Its hull stress readings remained nominal. Koreth's energy absorption sensor returned a value she read twice because the first reading seemed like a calibration error. The gravemark had absorbed 6 full-yield emitter strikes, and its hull temperature had risen by 4 degrees. Not 400. 4. "The hull plating is something we don't have a material catalog entry for." She had time to think. Then the gravemark moved. Not fast at first. That was the thing that stayed with Koreth afterward, in the silence that followed. It moved with a deliberateness that was more frightening than speed. It rotated 45 degrees along its central axis, bringing its starboard battery to face the Varath fleet. And in the amber light of the Reach's gas columns, Koreth finally saw the hull clearly. Not a patrol cruiser's clean angular geometry, but something older and heavier. Its flanks scarred with impact scoring that told a history of engagement she had no catalog for. Its length not 430 meters, but closer to 500 when you accounted for the drive section running dark at the stern. The hull markings were partly obscured by the scoring, but she could read the designation amidships, ISFGRAVMRCH. Below it, in smaller lettering, a class designation, Heavy Siege Cruiser. She had not been trained on heavy siege cruisers. Nobody had told her they existed. "Evasive," she said, because Drevik was staring at the viewport and not talking, and someone had to say it. The gravemark fired. Its port battery discharged first 8 emitters. She counted them by the light blooms, and the destroyer on the Varath fleet's left flank came apart. Not damaged. Apart. The energy yield was enough that the destroyer's own ammunition cooked off in the secondary detonation, and the resulting debris cloud expanded through the fleet's formation at shrapnel velocity, striking 4 adjacent hulls before the formation could separate. The Varath cruisers began to scatter. Drevik was ordering an evasive response now, his voice carrying the flat efficiency of a man who had done this before, and for 3 seconds Koreth thought the fleet's dispersal might matter. Then the gravemark's starboard battery fired into the spreading formation. The next 4 minutes were a record in Koreth's log, time-stamped and filed, because she never stopped doing her job. She logged the destroyer's death at 4 minutes 11 seconds into the engagement. She logged the cruiser Vethon taking a direct strike at 4 minutes 19 seconds and breaking across its midpoint, both sections tumbling into the Reach's gas columns. She logged the cruiser Varath 7 attempting a ramming approach, the oldest Varath naval tactic, the last resort when weapons failed, and she logged the gravemark not evading the ram but turning into it, absorbing the impact on its forward armored prow at a relative closing velocity that should have cracked the human ship open. The gravemark's hull stress readings through the impact remained nominal. The Varath 7 disintegrated against the forward plating like something fragile breaking against something that had been made not to break. A cruiser on the fleet's starboard wing tried a different approach maximum thrust, angling for the Gravemark drive section from the aft quarter. The rear arc was narrower, the firing angles constrained. Korath watched it close to 40,000 kilometers, then 30. The Gravemark did not turn to engage. Instead, it pivoted a secondary battery she had not identified on the hull before this moment, mounted low on the dorsal ridge, and the cruiser forward shield array collapsed inward without a secondary explosion, without visible damage, just a system that had been functioning and then was not. The cruiser passed the Gravemark position still under drive, no weapons firing, no course correction, no communication. Whatever the secondary battery had done, it had done it cleanly. At 4 minutes 40 seconds, a second destroyer's drive section detonated when a Gravemark emitter strike ignited its fuel lines. The shockwave buffeted the immovable doctrine hard enough that Korath had to grip her console to stay on her feet. Drevek was dead by minute 6. The immovable doctrine took a strike to its command section at the 442nd second of the engagement, and the command section ceased to exist, and Korath was suddenly the senior surviving officer on a ship that had lost its bridge and was running on emergency systems from the secondary hull. She did not die because the Gravemark stopped firing at the immovable doctrine after that strike. It stopped because the ship was already crippled, and whatever calculus the Gravemark's captain was running, it apparently did not include finishing off secondary hulls that were no longer threats. The engagement lasted 7 minutes and 40 seconds from the first Varath shot to the cessation of the Gravemark's battery fire. Of 11 Varath hulls, 3 survived in some form, the immovable doctrine's secondary section, and 2 cruisers that had scattered far enough to remain outside effective range. 6 were destroyed, 2 were hulks drifting. The Gravemark held position for another 11 minutes. Korath watched it on her emergency display from the secondary hull's damage control station, still running her logs, still filing her readings. The ship's hull stress readings remained nominal throughout. Its energy output never spiked in a way that suggested damage or strain. It sat in the amber columns of the Reach the same way it had sat before the engagement, with the patience of something that had been waiting and was now simply done waiting. Then it moved on, not away from the corridor, through it, continuing along its original transit vector, the one it had been holding when the immovable doctrine challenged it, the one it had never actually deviated from. Korath filed her after-action report from the emergency station while the rescue beacon cycled. She filed it in the Varath Navy's standard format, section by section, complete with her formal tactical descent from the bridge log and the 3 rounds of mass register recalibration she had run before the engagement. She filed the energy absorption data, 4 degrees of hull temperature rise from 6 full-yield emitter strikes. She filed the hull classification, heavy siege cruiser, and the mass reading and the weapons yield estimates she had calculated from what she had observed. She filed the part where she had said she needed to identify the ship before engaging, and Drevek had said noted. Then she sat in the flickering emergency light and thought about that word. Noted, not overruled, not argued, noted, the way you noted the weather. She had been correct about the mass register, correct about the hull classification, correct about every number she had flagged, and the bridge log would show that, and none of it had mattered because a fleet commander with 14 engagements on his record had looked at a ship he didn't recognize and made the arithmetic of 11-to-1 feel like safety. The Gravemark's drive signature faded on her display at 12 minutes past the end of the engagement. It passed through the Reach's inner corridor without transmitting, without filing a contact report, without any indication that the engagement had been anything other than a delay on its schedule. It had not fired first. Korath had that on her logs too. Of 11 Varath hulls, 3 had survived to send a signal. The Varath Naval Command Archive would receive her report within 8 hours. The archive would add the Gravemark's hull class to the threat catalog, heavy siege cruiser, mass 421,000 metric tons, hull plating material unknown, Weapons yield approximately 40 times that of a standard patrol cruiser, filling in a gap that should have been filled in before any Varath ship was ever authorized to challenge an unknown contact in that corridor. She knew how the process worked. It was a sensible process. The catalog updated when new data came in, the protocols adjusted. The next fleet commander to meet a ship that didn't match the archive would have a classification entry to consult. She had no complaint with the process itself. She had a complaint with the word noted, and with the 6 Varath hulls that had gone into the Reach's gas columns, because a man who commanded 11 ships had decided that 11 was enough to make the question irrelevant. Korath added the final timestamp to her log and closed the file. The rescue beacon cycled. Outside the damaged secondary hull's viewport, the Hirvath Reach's amber gas columns turned slowly in the gravitational shear, indifferent and enormous, the same as they had been before the engagement, and the same as they would be long after the wreckage had finished drifting. The gravemark was already gone. It had been in the catalog, somewhere, misclassified, understated, filed under a designation that made it sound like a routine transit contact. That was the only explanation that made any sense. Someone had seen the hull and logged it wrong, and the wrong classification had sat in the archive, and Drevik had pulled the archive entry and seen patrol cruiser and made his decision. Korath's descent was in the log. All the numbers were in the log. She did not know if that was any comfort. It was, at least, accurate.